Today we're going to be talking about the actual reason for Trump's rally in Tulsa, Bill Barr's disastrous attempt to fire the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and install a handpicked successor, and my interview with House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, where we discuss whether Trump should be charged after he leaves office, and his message directly to Mitch McConnell for trying to sabotage police reform legislation in the Senate. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. Well, if the rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma was supposed to be the official relaunch of Trump's campaign, that does not bode well for the president. Trump and his team had spent the last week touting the idea that 1 million people would be showing up to his rally in Tulsa. They said the arena with 19,000 seats would fill up immediately. There was talk of putting another 10,000 in a space next door. They set up an overflow space and promised that Trump would address the crowd of hundreds of thousands of people himself personally. And by the time Trump showed up, that was not the case. The arena itself was maybe half full. Estimates range from 6,000 to 12,000. The outdoor stage was dismantled before Trump even came out to speak, and the Trump campaign was reportedly sending out texts to its supporters with the words, "There's still space." Remember when Jeb Bush asking his supporters to please clap was the saddest thing to happen to a Republican on the campaign trail? We're talking about a Republican president not being able to turn out 19,000 people in a state that's voted Republican since 1964. Good news for Trump, though, is at least his inauguration crowd size isn't so embarrassing anymore. Now, as for the other 990,000 people that the campaign spent the week screeching about, it seems that the reason the Trump campaign thought that 1 million people were going to show up is that a bunch of kids on the social media app TikTok, plus fans of K-pop, Korean pop, went online and flooded the Trump campaign with hundreds of thousands of ticket requests with no intention of actually showing up and basically just juiced the campaign's numbers. Then they deleted all their posts before they spread to the mainstream internet and the campaign caught wind, meaning that Trump's official relaunch, the political event of the year by what's supposed to be the most sophisticated campaign in history, got played by a bunch of, 15-year-olds online, which I think is just fantastic. I mean, this is straight hubris, right? The campaign was so obsessed with its numbers that it kept posting 800,000, 900,000, 1 million people coming, to the point where even the actual attendees got scared away. Who wants to deal with trying to get one of 19,000 seats among 1 million people? But that's the thing. The campaign didn't care about logistics. They just want numbers. That's it. They just want numbers because Trump has one priority, and it is warm-blooded bodies. And so when it turned out that those tickets were actually teenagers trolling the campaign, well, what you're left with is a half-empty arena and a week of bad headlines. Aside from that, it might also have something to do with the global pandemic sweeping across the country and this state and city in particular. I don't know, maybe people just didn't want to die, So was the rally a failure? For a guy who's decided that crowd size is the most important indicator of success in life? By Trump's standards, yeah, it was. And look, I get that this is petty, okay? That's not lost on me. But honestly, if Trump wasn't so frantically obsessed with crowd size, if he wasn't so obnoxious about pointing out how he's never had an empty seat, it wouldn't even be an issue. I think it's a good thing that 1 million people didn't show up in the middle of a pandemic. And in fact, my only beef here is that 10,000 did anyway, which is still a wholly unacceptable number given Oklahoma's coronavirus surge. But crowd size aside, I want to talk about why this rally happened. Why is Trump holding a rally in a safe red state that hasn't voted for a Democrat in a half century with virtually zero electoral significance in the middle of a global pandemic, in a state where cases have gone up 500% in the last 3 weeks? Few reasons. First off, he's trying to prove to people that the country is ready to reopen. His priority is the economy. That's it. The economy goes nowhere without businesses reopening, so Trump figures that if he can get on stage and repeat, just like he does 450 times a day, that the country's reopen, that he can manifest this reality. By the way, not a new strategy for Trump, repeating some lie to will it into existence. He'd repeat complete and total exoneration from the Mueller probe, when in reality, the Mueller report literally said that it does not exonerate the president. He'd repeat law and order to try and brand himself as the guy who, didn't commit campaign finance violations and emoluments clause violations and 10 instances of obstruction of justice and extort a foreign country for dirt on a political opponent and orchestrate a large-scale cover-up. All of that's to say, Trump's strategy is just to tell a lie, say it lots of times, and pretend that it's real. So that's what we're seeing play out here. Trump We'll use the bully pulpit of the presidency to tell the entire country that we're open, the goal being to put enough pressure on officials and businesses to actually open. He knows that if he can whip up enough of a frenzy and convince his supporters that everything should be open, that hopefully those businesses and the states they're in begin to cave and reopen. The point is to lie enough to actually manifest this false reality. And what goes hand in glove with the country reopening is pretending that coronavirus is over. It's not, but he's trying to convince you that it is for no reason other than it's politically advantageous for him. By the way, this has been Trump's MO since day one, right? Since refusing to let a cruise ship with sick Americans aboard dock in the US because he didn't want his numbers to go up, and admitting it. And he said the same thing during the Tulsa rally, that he didn't want to test because tests would reveal more cases. Listen.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests if people don't know what's going on. We got tests. We got another one over here.
So you'll hear this from Adam Schiff in my interview coming up, but Schiff mentions that Trump lies all the time, but every now and then he says something utterly true and revealing only because he doesn't realize how damning it is. And that's what he did here, by literally acknowledging that his only concern is his numbers, not our lives, his numbers, which is why he spent the first 70 days of the outbreak downplaying this virus. Saying that cases would soon be down to zero, that it would go away with the heat, that it would be gone by April, that it would miraculously disappear. He was never interested in putting any work in to contain the spread because even doing that work would undermine his talking point that it didn't exist. So he went all in on his suppression efforts and didn't coordinate a nationwide testing or contact tracing system, and didn't invoke the Defense Production Act to make sure we had enough PPE, and didn't advocate for social distancing or mask wearing, because doing any of those things, those life-saving measures, would serve as proof that the virus was real, and if he acknowledged it was real, then it would threaten his stock market. And there is an election coming up, so of course he wouldn't want to do anything to put the market at risk. An entire cycle of self-serving lies and misinformation that continues to this day. Even with 120,000 Americans dead, the guy is still following the exact same strategy that landed us here in the first place. By the way, the irony being that until this virus is contained, the economy is going to stay depressed. Maybe some people are going to go out, but definitely not all, and they won't until the cases decline. And cases aren't declining because of efforts to reopen too soon before cases are contained. It's a vicious cycle that we all saw coming from a mile away. So Trump's own attempts to shoehorn the economy open are what are actually going to ensure that it stays closed the longest. That is our brilliant deal maker of a president at work. Art of the deal, folks. One more major reason for this rally is that he's also trying to draw a contrast between himself and Joe Biden, right? He's trying to give the impression that Joe is frail and old and holed up in his basement while Trump is not, even though the last couple of weeks, Biden's actually been out giving speeches while we've seen Trump walk down that West Point Military Academy ramp like it was his first day with legs. He couldn't lift a glass of water to his lips during that same speech, and that re-raised concerns about the fact that Trump made an unannounced visit to Walter Reed Hospital in November of 2019 that he tried to play off as a partial annual physical. Just your run-of-the-mill emergency physical under the cloak of darkness. Who among us, right? And that's the thing. Donald Trump isn't some 35-year-old athlete. You can't be Donald Trump and make the argument that someone else is unhealthy and confused. Have you read a transcript from a Trump speech, like read the words on paper? Those aren't coherent thoughts. It's just a smattering of words that fall out of his mouth. It is errant synapses firing in his brain with no actual through line. So, I get that Trump wants to attack Biden, but maybe failing mental capacities and frailty isn't the best argument coming from a 74-year-old obese man who thinks that exercise is bad for you and can't string together more than 4 words to form a complete sentence. Just a thought. Now, those are all factors for this Tulsa rally, but here is the actual prevailing reason. According to a CNN interview with a Trump political advisor, quote, "I guarantee you after Saturday, if everything goes well, he's going to be in a much better mood. He believes that he needs to be out there fighting and he feeds off the energy of the crowds," end quote. This is all for Trump's mood. I mean, couldn't we give him the iPad for an extra hour? Doesn't that usually work? Seriously, when most of us are in a bad mood, we, eat a pint of ice cream? Donald Trump is going to sacrifice someone's grandparents. I know it sounds alarmist, but even the roughly 10,000 people who did show up did so in the middle of a pandemic where 120,000 people have already died. In case I'm not being crystal clear here, there are likely people who are alive in Oklahoma right now who won't be in a few weeks because Donald Trump needs applause. And on top of that, as if we needed any more confirmation of what's about to happen in Oklahoma because of this rally, as of Saturday morning, before the rally was even set to begin, 6 members of the Trump campaign advance staff in Tulsa who were doing logistics for the rally tested positive for coronavirus. I'm not a spiritual person, but do you think the universe is trying to tell us something? Trump's own staff is already infected, already in Tulsa, and likely already spreading it. If you don't think this is going to be an unmitigated public health disaster, then you're just denying reality. Because what we have is tens of thousands of people crammed into an indoor arena in a state that's seen a 500% increase in positive cases in the last 3 weeks, in a city that is the epicenter of those cases in the state, to cheer on a guy whose position is to not wear a mask and whose campaign has employed people who already have the virus. If I was trying to get coronavirus, these are the steps I would take. And yet it's happening anyway with, no formidable pushback from anyone in an entire political party on the right because they want Trump to be in a good mood. Remember that for the eulogies. I want to switch gears to Attorney General Bill Barr here. And look, Barr's glaring dishonesty is no secret, right? Barr lied about tear gassing peaceful protesters, American citizens, on camera in front of the entire nation. He lied about the Mueller report before it was released. He lied about dropping the Flynn case. He lied about Ukraine. But something happened this past weekend that may just take the cake. On Friday night, Barr announced the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, whose office has been involved in prosecuting members of Trump's inner circle, was resigning, and that Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, would apparently replace him. Clayton, I should mention here, has zero prosecutorial experience. He does, however, have experience defending Deutsche Bank in a $10 billion money laundering scam with Moscow. That bank also just so happened to loan billions of dollars to Trump's company and firms controlled by Jared Kushner. Nice little web that I'm totally sure leads to nothing suspicious whatsoever. So Barr wants to replace Berman with this guy, Jay Clayton. But Berman came out and basically denied the move. He released a statement of his own saying, quote, "I have not resigned and have no intention of resigning my position," and added that he'd only learned he was stepping down from a Justice Department news release. He said he would stay in the position until the U.S. Senate confirms a replacement. Then Bill Barr shot back, declaring that, in fact, Trump had made the decision to remove Berman from his post and accused Berman of choosing, quote, public spectacle over public service. He added, quote, "By operation of law, the Deputy United States Attorney, Audrey Strauss, will become the acting United States Attorney, and I anticipate that she will serve in that capacity until a replacement successor is in place." Meaning that apparently Barr had dropped his push for Jay Clayton to fill the role. And then minutes later, when asked about this, Trump comes out and says this.
So that's all up to the Attorney General. Attorney General Barr is working on that. That's his department, not my department. But we have a very capable Attorney General, so that's really up to him. I'm not involved.
That he's not involved. Meaning Trump didn't fire Berman, meaning Bill Barr lied to illegally remove a U.S. attorney from his post. Of course, the flip side of that is Trump did move to have him fired. He was just too cowardly to own up to it because of the obvious shitty optics, and so he decided to abandon Barr. But in doing so, he prevented Barr from actually being able to carry out the firing in the first place, since it's Trump who needs to do it. And yet, even still, for some reason that I don't fully understand, Berman came out and said, quote, "In light of Barr's decision to respect the normal operation of law and have Deputy U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss become acting U.S. Attorney, I will be leaving the U.S. Attorney's office for the Southern District of New York effective immediately." Even though the Attorney General doesn't have the right to fire him, and Trump came out and said that he didn't make the call. The likely reason is that it was because Barr relented on replacing him with Jay Clayton and instead allowed Audrey Strauss, who's Berman's deputy, to take over. And Strauss is highly capable and respected, so Berman figured that the office would be in good hands with her, as opposed to some lackey handpicked for obvious reasons by Bill Barr. But the takeaway here from this entire roller coaster is that there is no floor with Bill Barr. If you're not yet convinced of Barr's depravity, consider what he did here. He put out a press release saying that Berman agreed to resign when he did no such thing, proving that Barr lied. Then he claimed that Trump wanted Berman fired, only to have Trump claim that he never fired the guy, proving again that Barr lied, all the while accusing Berman of creating a spectacle. I mean, of all the corrupt sycophants in this administration, Bill Barr is at the bottom of the heap. By the way, why target this office? This is the office that prosecuted Michael Cohen. Cohen handled the hush money payouts for Trump's affairs. But if Cohen was successfully prosecuted for making the payments, and he did it at the direction of Trump, then how do you argue that the person directing the illegal activity that Cohen himself was locked up for shouldn't also be in prison? So if that investigation is still ongoing and Michael Cohen is cooperating, then that bodes really poorly for Trump. SDNY is also currently investigating Rudy Giuliani for his role in Trump's Ukraine extortion scheme. And so whatever the reason, you have to ask yourself, why would Barr risk a huge outcry only 5 months before the election by trying to oust this U.S. attorney? Whatever they know he was about to come out with must have scared them even more than the blowback. And the blowback has been severe. So whatever it is they know is probably pretty bad. And I just want to be clear here. This blatant corruption is on Bill Barr, absolutely. But it is also the direct result of a Republican Senate too collectively scared of a mean Trump tweet. When Senate Republicans refused to hold Trump accountable during his impeachment trial, they sent a message loud and clear that this administration wouldn't face any accountability. And so this is what happens. This is the direct result of Republican cowardice. So what happens now? As of this recording, it looks like Audrey Strauss is taking over at SDNY, which is a hell of a lot better than Jay Clayton taking over. But Congress should still call Bill Barr to testify immediately. And if he doesn't show up, then issue a subpoena. And if he refuses to comply, then hold him in contempt of Congress. And if an impeachment inquiry needs to be opened up, then do it. If we're not going to use the levers of government available to us in the face of outright corruption, then what are we even doing? That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, produced by Sam Graber, music by Wellesley, and recorded in Los Angeles, California. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your preferred podcast app and check out briantylercohen.com for links to all of my other channels.